Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I am your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan. And Christmas Day has come and went. What did you get in the draft, Cranky?
It was a hell of a weekend, Grump. It's one of those brain overload weekends. We had 3 days of the draft. We had Knicks playoffs. We had Lightning playoffs. Just got eliminated, so rest in peace, Bolts tonight. So I'm a little down in it, but we'll get over it.
Well, most
Uh,
Giants fans have Rangers playoffs, so
Screw them. Screw
okay.
all of you guys. I hope you get swept in the next round. So, no, I mean, just I ran down to Tampa on Saturday to watch the playoff game. Came back Sunday morning to watch that epic Nick game, and all the while all this is happening, it was kind of like just constantly getting updates on the draft and stuff, and peeping in and out of the Talking Giants. Uh, your guys' live stream, which was excellent as always, and just a lot. It's going to be like this now for the next couple of weeks, going, as we think about the draft and the implication of that and all the other playoffs and stuff. There's just not enough time for sleep and work and sports. So sorry, work, you're gonna have to suffer.
Well, this was an important one. I'm glad, that I was invited back with the Talking Giants guys, got to sit in with them. Because this is Joe Shane's third draft, and this is a really, really important one. At this point
Hmm.
now, with a GM and a coach, you're hoping that you're turning a corner. And the Giants are sort of in a nebulous, weird spot right now. And the draft was a landmark spot for how the course of Joe Shane and Brian Dable's career with the Giants is going to go.
Hmm.
This was a pivotal fork in the river here.
Hmm.
And, to some extent, the river has its own forces that you can only fight against for so long. But nevertheless, that is the river chosen by Joe Shane and Brian Dable. That's the path that they're taking. So we're going to
Bef-
get into all of that. I do want to say something at the top of this, though, before we get
yeah,
into anything draft related at all. Rest in peace, Corey Cunningham died at 28 years old.
awful.
Yeah,
Just
really.
awful news.
I don't know that we have any details other than he was found dead when, like, unresponsive family member was not getting any answers from him. And I guess I'm not like, I mean, like, it's really sad. Don't know what happened. Doesn't really matter. It's sad anyway.
Mm-mm.
But lots of really nice things to say about him from tons of his teammates. Like,
Well,
really nice, not just like the normal stuff.
that's what really gets you, because Corey Cunningham is never going to have his name in the Ring of Honor. He's never going to be in the montage of great Giants ever. And he wasn't here that long. But when you hear, you know, players, coaches, staff members, media, all kind of universally, besides being shocked, just really upset, and just all praising the guy of what a good guy he was, what a locker room guy he was, and everything. When you hear locker room guy, that doesn't just mean he's a good teammate. That usually means he's a good person.
Right.
And it's just really awful. And when people always ask me, like, "Hey, man, you're nuts. Why are you getting up at 5 in the morning to run to a football game? Or why do you do this? Or you and cranky wife are doing that, and you guys are insane." It's like, you know why? Because we're on this marble once.
Yeah. Life
And
is short.
the last thing you want to do is be on your deathbed and regret the things you wanted to do, and either just procrastinated and never did it, or just never had the opportunity. So my advice to everyone listens to this show is balls out, man. Live your life. If it's something you want to do, you know, do it in a responsible way. And don't, like, put yourself into super debt where you're going to be regretting what you did. But if it's something where I don't want to do this because of something, a silly reason. Just do it. And it's a simple cliche thing, but this just reminds you that you know you only have one time on this planet, and let's make the most of it.
For real. Now there's going to be 13 or 14 Evil Knievels spawned on your advice. You just
It
go for it.
If anybody's still listening to me at this point, you have your own issues and your own problems. But yeah.
So should we get into the draft? Is there anything you
Ye-
want to
yeah,
lead
yeah.
off with?
Let's talk before we get into players and stuff. Again, we're looking at this from two different perspectives. Like you were in the foxhole and you were, micro dissecting everything in real time it was happening. And I admittedly, you know, on the priority list, I kind of had the draft a little behind the pressing moments of the playoffs and everything. So I kind of wanted to get your, just before we get into actual players, your overall feeling how you walked out after Saturday, because I think it's interesting that we have both said that we want this team really built from the inside out. And the fact we didn't take any linemen on either pick was kind of very interesting to me. That you know, I don't think that this coaching staff, this front office, is any sort of danger at all. But and it shouldn't be. But it was just interesting how they didn't go for unsexy picks that could be the foundation of this team going forward. That was the one thing that, like, kind of jumped out at me a little bit after, going through everybody we picked and everything, because we got all of our opinions on each individual guy, and I'm sure we'll do that coming up. But it was interesting how you know the biggest need we think for no matter who this quarterback is going to be, what weapons we have is this offensive line. It's incomplete as starters. There's severe issues in depth, and it wasn't addressed. Um, what's your thought?
Um, well, it's kind of a mixed feeling. When I walked out of it, um, when I really walked away from the draft on Saturday, I felt happy. I can look at the draft and look at the selections, and I can be happy with these selections.
Mhm.
Um, and each individual night, I would say that I walked away from the draft feeling happy with the selections. But in the moment, the picks seemed to be, um, I don't know.
Yeah, not that we settle on this pick, but it was kind of like,
I don't know. It was like more like a sigh of relief that they had taken who they had taken and not done something silly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I don't really know how to explain it. But this is what I said leading into this. We had an episode before the draft, and my honest to God, I think I'm going to get more coherent as these episodes get more irrelevant throughout the summer.
Oh, thank
Because
God.
my brain has been mashed potatoes since
Yeah,
January,
of
just
course.
doing all this stuff, and I don't remember which episode would. I don't think it was the one right before the draft. I'm not really sure if it was the Monday before the draft or the week before that, but we were talking about our general feeling heading to this draft, and I told you, like, I finally
This
let out this pessimistic feeling of
that was the
like,
second show we did before, not the draft, not draft eve. That was the Monday show. You said
okay,
that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I had this feeling of like, look, it's going to be great if Malik Neighbors is the pick. I can deal with a JJ McCarthy pick, but I don't know how to feel about that. But
Mm,
if there's no quarterback, like if there's no like this is the guy that they have decided that they have drafted, like they are building around this guy, I have this sense of, okay, we've added players. Like without doing that, all I can think about is that all the players that we added here will help this team get better in 2024. But in 2025, I still see the same problem. I have no like long term, like I don't know, because the quarterback position is so important, and it's all resting on Daniel Jones coming back from injury yet
y-
again.
yeah, that was kind of my thinking too. Is like we didn't. You like to have out of like at least one guy, maybe two out of a draft who's like becomes your cornerstones. And we did a
Right.
whole exercise for over a month about, good enough versus build around. And, I don't know how many build arounds we got from this draft. That doesn't mean that it's a bad draft or that this team's not going to be better. I mean, I think people get so wrapped up in, you know, hey, this guy, we got a grade of a C for this guy or a C plus for the draft overall. This team is still better right now than it was a week ago right now.
Certainly.
And I think, please, you got to remember that too. We didn't get worse as a team because of that. But you said something like after each day you felt better. And I did too, but it's one of those, okay, I had this one beer. That was really tasty. I had another beer. Oh, that one was really good too. But when I'm done, after I finish my drinking for the night, I feel okay, but I don't feel like fantastic after each individual beer I had. And I think that's kind of how I felt after this. It was like we got pieces that we needed, but I don't feel like the direction of this team has changed. Like we've, you know,
Right. So it feels
getting
like
into it.
at the end of last season, this team needed a monumental shift, and it doesn't feel like we did anything towards a monumental shift. Now, that might be a little bit unfair.
Yes, and
eh,
the draft is not the only piece that
right. So like
changes it.
part of the thing to remember is that the Giants went out and got a different offensive line coach, and to his credit, I've never felt like the Raiders' offensive line was filled with any sort of stars, and yet they did a pretty damn good job against Wink Martindale's defense and
Yeah.
picking up blocks, like stunts with an interim head coach. I mean, shit was a mess.
Hmm.
From what I've heard, he's a total hard ass, so he's gonna get on these guys. I don't know how today's diva NFL player deals with that sort of thing, but I tend to think that the trench guys are not as uh, uh, sensitive to hard coaching as these skill set guys. Do you get that same sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think you get
I have
branded really
nothing to
quickly.
back that up either.
I just think it's the nature of the position. I think their mentality. I mean, you are not a star if you're a right guard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a wide receiver is the one who, is going to get the endorsements. They're the one on NFL films, the slow motion, film of them catching passes and scoring touchdowns and getting glory and getting, you know, you hear from them in press conferences. They become celebrities and they become personalities. When you are, Joe Lunchpail as a left guard or even a tackle, you're there to work. You're not. The ball is never in your hands. Well, shouldn't be. If it is, there's a big problem. But it's kind of the nature of the beast where it's expected to, be the. It's like this country. It's like the backbone of this country. It's the working man. It's the farmer. It's the factory worker. They're proud of what they do and they don't mind, having dirty nails and calluses on their hands. So I think, I think the hard ass coach is what's needed for the position. I think it offensive line and defensive line is as much about effort as it is skill and talent and working together and pushing yourself during off-season workouts in the gym, workouts in OTAs when you're doing walkthroughs when you're hitting that sled. So it just kind of goes with the position in the territory. And if guys like, I'm not picking him specifically, but let's use Evan Neal for example, who you know was the biggest badass in his high school and played at Alabama and won championships and was destined to go to the NFL. This is the first time that he's not going to get his ass kissed, especially in college. And this is something else to remember too. These players are more kissed their asses kissed in college than they ever were because of the threat of the transfer portal and NIL. So now you sign a contract, you're here, and you have the ability to be a hard ass on him. So I think I'm putting a lot of eggs in this offensive line is underachieved because of poor coaching, and I'm hoping for the best for that because you know this seems to be a common theme of why these guys are underachieving, and it's not just because we've invested draft picks. We've invested free agent money in this in the last couple of years, and we don't have the results yet. So, you know, maybe this is what we need.
Yeah, so I think that's what Joe Shane and Brian Dable are kind of banking on because they did invest, in Josh Azudu, Marcus McKeithen. They got Ben Bredesen. They didn't get him back though. But John Michael Schmitz, Andrew Thomas, they invested in with a contract extension.
Evan
Evan
Neal.
Neal, they invested in, and then they brought in veteran guys that are So, like, it seems to me that the approach is they're not going to give up on their investments. They're going to bring in quality coaching. They're going to bring
Mhm.
in veterans. And if the coaching doesn't get the rookies into playing shape, or the young kids into playing shape by week one, then you have veterans who are ready to go in there. And while that's not the plan for the future, or maybe it's not even the plan for the whole season, you don't have to feel like you just have a bunch of kids back there, or a bunch of uh, you know,
Right.
like cast-offs. So I'm not saying that that's my perspective. I don't really know dick about Carmen Barcelo. I've never met the man. I've never spoken to him. I've never seen him coach.
Well,
I don't
we
know
know they made
dick
it.
about
We
these
know they made a
veterans either.
change.
Yeah,
We know they made a change at offensive line coach. That tells me.
I'm just saying that tells everything they've done tells me that that's their perspective, and I
Mhm.
don't think it's necessarily bad, because there is no reason really to give up on their investments already. Like, if unless you really feel like your analysis on them was bad and it's time to give up on them, then don't. Because if you still see the promise that you saw when you drafted them, it was only 3 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, this is the time for them to turn the corner. Maybe all they needed was a kick in the ass and the right coach.
Michael Smith was a rookie playing center with
Yeah, well, yeah, that's too.
with a lot with not a lot of help to either side of him.
I mean
So
more the Josh Azudu left guard
yeah,
investment, and the Evan Neal right tackle
but I mean,
investment.
people started to lump him into another bust, which was ridiculous. But that's it's not just the complete lunatic fringe on Giants Twitter that was saying that.
Right. All right, so
Uh,
let's get into the guys though, because we're 15 minutes. We haven't talked about nothing yet.
yeah.
All right, so the most important thing right here: pick one, round one, pick six, Thursday night. The Los Angeles Chargers picked Joe Alt at 5. So
Yeah.
everything happened the way that we feared it would. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and then Drake May. After that, Marvin Harrison to Arizona. And then with the Chargers on the board, they really let the clock go down far. And you could kind of say, oh, it might be Neighbors, but it could be McCarthy too. I mean, I don't know. It's Harbaugh. Maybe he's trading down and somebody else is going to take McCarthy
Hmm.
before the
Hmm.
Giants get there. Joe Alt never even crossed my mind in that moment, in that like 10 minutes of panic that were happening there. Not even 10 minutes, because, once the Drake May thing happened, I knew Arizona was going either Neighbors or Harrison, which meant, disaster for us. And so
Right.
Joe Alt gets picked, and I couldn't have been happier. But this is what I was saying before, where it's like, I feel good, but it felt more like relief. So the Giants
Hmm.
come in there and they take Malik Neighbors. They didn't pick JJ McCarthy just because they need a quarterback, or they feel like they need to change a quarterback, or anything like that. They didn't like JJ McCarthy enough to take him at 6, and that is what we've been told. So instead, we get Malik Neighbors. So before we go into the JJ McCarthy thing, let's talk about Malik Neighbors. 6 feet, 200 pounds. So about average height, good build. This guy is a route running machine. Excellent, smooth feet, no wasted movement. And one of the things that he does really, really well throughout the route is he's able to tempo his speed. So he can lull corners to sleep and then accelerate out of them. Really good speed, sharp cut on quickness, really strong hands as well. Great body control, goes up and gets it. He works well at all 3 levels. And the thing that everybody says is like the play just begins when the ball's in his hands.
Hmm.
But that really is true. And just the fact that it's from LSU, this isn't a comparison to Odell Beckham Jr. that way, but Odell Beckham Jr. really did project the 2016 New York Giants into the playoffs pretty much by himself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is the same caliber of player, someone who might just take a wide receiver screen 75 yards to the house.
Um, I saw him in person twice, and I was at the game this past year in Baton Rouge where Jaden Daniels basically won the Heisman Trophy on one game. Um, Neighbors had, I'm looking up the exact numbers here. He had 6 catches for 132 yards in that game, and he wasn't even the leading receiver. But I know the Florida secondary was cheese, but you can see just the twitchability and the explosiveness. This LSU offense wasn't quite the same as the one with Joe Burrow and all those guys before, but tons of big play potential. And one of those guys where you're like, okay, when we get to draft time, I see first round picks all over the place on this team. So I had made a mental note of him back then, not knowing, you know, that game was in mid October. So we hadn't completely fallen off a cliff yet, although we were, you know, kind of like the Roadrunner on our way down at that point. Um, there are so many holes to fill, and it's going to, we struggle with the inside versus outside. And I I am just glad that we stuck to whatever board we did and didn't feel we had to be pressured into taking the quarterback because the run was happening and it's now or never with a quarterback. We're in a tough spot. 6 is a very tough spot to pick. You're just below the elite picking area where your probability for that elite quarterback is going to be there. You're in a tough spot where people may not be that inclined to really trade with you so you can trade down to get more picks. So I think that was their top guy on the board. They got a guy who's now a wide receiver 1 for this team, and they got him. And we'll worry about the quarterback situation next year if we need to worry about it.
Yeah.
A lot of obituaries are already written about Daniel Jones where the heartbeat's still beating, and this is the year we're going to find out. And if his season falls apart again, if he just can't play anymore or something, we'll probably be in a position next year to get that quarterback that we want.
I mean, we've seen reports too that his ACL healing process is on track to start. So there is that. I agree. And this is the only pick that made sense. If you weren't going to take JJ McCarthy, this is the pick that made the most sense. This is the highest impact player. I think in 99% of years, this wide receiver would be the first wide receiver off the board. And I think in like 70% of years, you could make the argument that he would be the first player taken off the board.
And let's remember too, Marvin Harrison Jr. has so much going for him to be picked ahead. Forget skill set. He's the son of an NFL guy. He plays at one of the most highest profile schools in the country, who always has tons of national media attention on him. His narrative started 18 months ago. It's hard to all of a sudden, that narrative train to switch. So, if you want to do like a side-by-side comparison of, their physical traits and their film and all this stuff, it's probably a lot closer than Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously is the number 1 wide receiver that's going to be taken off the board.
Right. And I wasn't really sure how I would rank because they function slightly differently. That I wasn't really sure which one I ranked higher, and I was being completely honest about it. Like,
well, let me ask you a question then. For what the Giants would like to do now, I'm not saying what they can do right now with Daniel Jones or even right now with Mike Kafka, because you don't draft for 1 year, you draft for the next several years, and what your vision of what you ultimately want to be. Which of those 2 receivers do you think was the better fit for what Brian Daboll wants to do?
well, I'm not really sure. I think Neighbors projects to be more similar to Stephon Diggs than Marvin Harrison, so I don't know if that says anything. But what I will say is both of them project well into the future for any offense. They're both explosive. They just function a little bit differently. But what I think is interesting about Neighbors is that I think that he can help an anemic offense like the one that we have. Like, I mean, this whole podcast spawned from us arguing about how annoying it was that Giants fans couldn't see that the 2016 Giants weren't good, and that they were really getting by on an easier schedule, some great defense, and like one-off plays from Beckham. And Neighbors is that kind of Beckham. Like, he's the kind of guy that can take last year's offense and, a 6-win team could be a 9-win team. All of a sudden, it's not so silly anymore to think that they could go to the playoffs, even though Daniel Jones missed all this time and Tommy DeVito had to play a game. You know what I mean? So, like, I actually think that while both project well into the future, Neighbors helps them in the short term and the future. So,
And
I mean,
quite
I think you can make the argument that if both were on the board, Neighbors is the more solid pick to go with for the Giants.
and quite frankly, don't discount that short-term ability as being very important, because hearts and minds need to be changed in this town. Whether
Jobs
it's
are
the
on the line here.
exactly, whether it's the fans or more importantly the media, which influences the fans. You know, front office that might starting to feel heat from the guys who sign their paychecks. So it's not saying that we have to win 13 games next year, but you want to see progress, and you know walk before you can run, and this guy helps us walk probably a little faster.
Yeah. Um, so how do you feel about that? Are you happy? Like, forget the context, forget the quarterbacks, whatever. Like, this is the guy. This is a New York Giant now. Malik Neighbors. How do you feel?
I mean, the hardest positions to get on the open market are quarterback, left tackle, and a wide receiver one that really, really makes a difference. Otherwise, they're astronomically expensive to get and not even available that often to get.
Right.
So I think if you have the potential that you can get a star at wide receiver, I'm not saying he's going to be Jerry Rice. I'm not even saying, he's going to be Odell Beckham. I hope he's not Odell Beckham as far as being a shithead. But um, he made our receiver room a lot better. He will make Daniel Jones' life, or, the odds are he's going to be here longer than Daniel Jones was. He'll make quarterback future better. So, yeah. And again, this is part of my evolving opinion and thought about the draft in general, where, the older I get and the more times we do this, I get less and less involved in the gamification of the draft. The grade this, grade that. We're better than them, we're better than that. It's the draft is more and more to me is getting pieces that will make us better. That's all I care about. I don't care if we won the draft, we got an A and they got a C or something. And that's like I need pieces to make us better. At the top of the draft, I need foundational pieces, because you need several foundational pieces across several position groups on either side of the ball. And we at 6, we may not get the foundational piece that's going to be your franchise quarterback for the next 15 years, but franchise quarterbacks usually have a franchise receiver they throw to. And we have the potential to have one of those now. So I'm happy.
Yeah. I'm excited to. So, like, this is where, like, you compare. People say Saquon Barkley is like a game changer or like a
Mhm.
mismatch guy or something you really have to account for, and that's true. But he's a lot easier to account for than Malik Neighbors, and I think that he's going to be more impactful. Um,
I feel like the difference between a guy like Barkley and a guy like him is Barkley needs a lot of pieces
right,
for him to be
exactly.
really successful.
Just
You
based
have a
on the
shitty
nature of his
offensive line,
position.
you're shit. Wide receiver, you can scheme around a bad offensive line to get the ball in his hands to do things to make it happen. So, in that respect, he can have more impact on an easier chance to make more of an impact than a guy like Barkley, who so relies on having, a good offensive line, relies on having a passing game to open up the running game, things like that.
Um, with the second pick in round 2 at pick 47, the Giants selected safety from Minnesota Tyler Nubin, 6'1", 200 pounds, 32-inch arms. I really like his like closing speed. So this is a guy who loves to gamble. He likes to jump routes. And I say gamble because it's just like a football term that we're used to in that he's undercutting routes, but it's not gambling like he's guessing. This is
Mhm.
gambling based on seeing what's in front of him, film work, and baiting the quarterback. He's already as a safety in college
Yeah,
doing a good job of leading quarterbacks to throw into bad windows and taking advantage of it.
he's Mikey McDermott playing poker as opposed to just some guy, gambling and then playing a slot machine. It's educated a skill game what he's doing.
Right. So this is a ball hawking safety, and I think that this is, as you were saying, a foundational piece, and that you need foundational pieces on both sides of the ball and at multiple different levels. I think that the Giants have now with Tyler Nubin foundational pieces at all three levels of their defense. Dexter Lawrence and that defensive line group, I think in general is pretty solid with Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns. But then in the middle
It's
group,
our best unit, yeah,
yeah.
on the team.
Then with Bobby Okereke in the middle between them, and now Tyler Nubin in the back end, he's going to be able to have a little bit of a learning curve because of what he has in front of him. And I think that this defense is going to let him kind of roam around, and it's going to exploit his abilities. So this could be really exciting.
And it's also going to help a cornerback room that is still young and is still in transition.
Right.
So any help we can get. And I think I texted that to you when the pick happened. It was like, this is making the value and the performance, I think, of the corners we have now instantly better, having a guy like him.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it is still a rookie. This is still a huge jump from Big Ten to NFL. So.
But I always go with my philosophy is I'm not worried. You draft a guy for the present and the future. It's not just this year. I mean, yes, he's a rookie, and
Well, I hope by year 2 they have more experience in the corner room anyway. Like
exactly.
As in fresh blood, though.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm super excited about this pick because there was a number of different ways. Like once you passed round 1, especially the top of round 1, like now a lot of things are on the table. And I really like this one because I know it's not reality. What I was saying before the draft was that, like, I don't even care if they don't pick any defensive players, like, fix this offense, whatever. I know that's not reality. But I think that if you were going to pick a defensive player, the most impactful player you can pick for this defense, being that they already traded for Brian Burns to help this unit rush with just the front four, the most impactful thing you can do was either get, like, an ungodly defensive tackle to play next to Dexter Lawrence and complete the four in the front, or get yourself the safety that Shane Bowen needs and uses to kind of command the defense and command the secondary. It would be kind of like there was really no defensive tackle that was of that caliber on the board in the second round. Good ones, but none of that caliber. So this is the one that makes sense, and this is my highest graded safety. I know the Giants had a top 30 visit with Jaden Hicks from Washington State, who, different draft analysts had all over the board, but a lot of them had him as their top-ranked safety under or second behind Cooper DeJean, and I super duper did not like him. Like, I had him in the hundreds.
Okay.
So I was like sitting there shitting bricks, like, I don't know, like they might throughout all the night. Like, Jaden Hicks wasn't picked, I think, until the 4th round, but like if you were watching the draft on TV, you kept seeing like, oh, Mel's best available,
right.
Daniel Jeremiah is best available, and you keep seeing Jaden Hicks like near the top of that list. So I wasn't sure what to expect. I was happy it was Tyler Nubin.
Yep, me too.
The interesting thing is that if you're thinking secondary, another really big weak point is definitely slot corner and just corner in general. And Michigan corner Mike Sainristil was still on the board at this point, and he's I know he's 5'9", and that is like always going to be the biggest knock on him. But as a guy who converted from wide receiver to defensive back, he absolutely 100% understands everything that's about to happen before it happens just by looking at the alignments and looking at the route trees and remembering what he saw in film. And that kind of shit shows up on game day for sure. And he's just the right kind of physical tools to play in that slot corner spot that is A, super duper important, B, hasn't been filled adequately on this roster in quite some time. So that was somebody I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, offensive tackle Patrick Paul from Houston was still on the board as well, and he went just shortly after. So So again, this is where they prioritize getting Shane Bowen something in the back. And admittedly, there's nothing at safety or corner, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
there
mean,
is
it
investments at tackle. So I think it's
it need
kind of
it needed
fair.
to be addressed. It might have been a more pressing need. So,
Um, let's slide ahead to round 3, pick 70. The Giants selected Andrew Phillips, corner from Kentucky. This is a Senior Bowl guy, so got to see
mhm.
him up and close.
Okay.
5'11", 190 pounds, 31-inch arms. This is a guy who runs 4.48 speed. He had a 42-inch vertical at 5'11". So
Gee.
he moves really, really well. He
Mhm.
has tools, but this is like the kind of guy that I like, and usually on day 3, because it's like all tools, no film. Like I can see what there is to build off of here. And theoretically this makes sense in the 3rd round, picking a guy like this. But
Mhm.
at Kentucky, he just left way too much cushion. Guys were open. He allowed a lot of completed passes. And, at the Senior Bowl, he caught my eye in one-on-ones and stuff, but not enough where I was like raving about him or anything like that.
Well, let me ask you a question though. Let me go back there for a second. When
Sure.
you say he left a lot of, how much of that is scheme and by design as opposed to lack of confidence or lack of skill?
Well, I mean that is certainly some draft analysts have that he may be more of a fit for a man scheme, and I think Kentucky ran a lot more zone.
Hmm.
And Shane Bowen's defense will be playing a lot more off man coverage. So this is something that he could probably excel at. And, I'm, in my opinion, not smart enough to know that transition can happen because, in my opinion, like that's harder, right?
Right.
And I don't know, but he does have the tools to do it. But this is kind of a swing. So, I mean,
Well,
I
you're
like,
also
God,
we're also getting to that point of the draft when you're in the 3rd round where you're not going for the home run swing, but you're trying to swing for extra bases a little bit.
right.
It's you're not expecting to draft starters down here, but you can take a little bit of a shot with it and see.
So that's kind of the interesting thing with this pick, right? Like, is he going to be a starter? Like, obviously, it all depends on him. But like when
Hmm.
they make this pick, it's hard to imagine somebody else is lining up at corner alongside Deontay Banks. And this is sort of where my frustration lies. So like, I like Andrew Phillips, the player. I think that this is because of what these smarter people say about Kentucky's defense and what these smarter people say about Shane Bowen's defense. I like the selection for this team. My
Hmm.
problem therein lies is that it almost feels like and obviously it's still April. It's not even May 1st yet. It's
Hmm.
April 29th, I think, today. Um, so it's not like the Giants can't make more moves, and maybe they will. But today, it's a little bit hard to imagine anyone else playing corner other than
Hmm.
him. And so you are putting this inexperienced green rookie who's all traits, no proven anything, and you are kind of penciling
Next
him in as a starter.
next to a second-year corner and a ball hawking but rookie
Yeah.
safety.
Right. And
That's a
then
lot. That's a lot of. But something though. I mean, maybe that's the calculus behind. We're going to have one of the best front fours in the league, and that could take a little bit of the pressure off them, possibly.
maybe I guess so. This is where I was just kind of I don't hate this pick. I like it. Um,
Hmm.
I'm sorry. I like this player. I don't hate
Yeah.
this player. I like this player. My problem is with this pick is Isaiah Adams, offensive guard from Illinois, was on the board and got picked quite literally immediately after this. And to
Hmm.
me, Isaiah Adams is the kind of player who looked very good at the Senior Bowl. Got to see him there as well. And he
Hmm.
looks like someone that can play multiple positions on the inside and is someone that actually could have been competing for a starting spot in a position that they already kind of have that covered, right?
Or let's just say more realistically, if somebody gets hurt, he could slide in, and we're not, shaking our boots.
Right. Well, but I mean, like, so you're making this pick. If you're picking Isaiah Adams, you're picking him for the future of this team anyway. You're hoping that he
Hmm.
develops and he becomes, your left guard, right guard of the future anyway.
For sure.
But this is a guy who actually could have competed for that spot right away, and he's not forced to win it, where they're
Hmm.
kind of like handing him the job even though he may not have earned it. Now you're kind of just doing that with Andrew Phillips. I don't know. To me, you could have
That's
gotten like a cheap. Like I keep saying this, like I can't imagine Fabian Moreau costing more than like $1 million.
right.
And like I'm not sitting here raving about Fabian Moreau, but we can get through 2024 with Fabian Moreau and worry about corner next year.
Right.
I
Right.
just
I
I don't
agree.
want to.
And that's where we're getting back to my kind of opening statement about the draft was, to completely, I get there's other needs and everything, but this offense eventually is going to be powered by its offensive line, and not to do anything was a little head scratching, especially now that, as we talk about it, there are options in the slots that we were picking that could have worked.
Yeah, and I think that's what was really frustrating for me.
Hmm.
But again, like I don't hate this player. I think, and I know this is like a really stupid thing, but there's just something cool about another guy named Phillips in our secondary. Just feels nice as a Giants fan. I like it. I know you don't care because Kenny Phillips was a Hurricane, but it's kind of like if there was another guy named Sparks, wouldn't you be excited for that?
Yeah, sure. As long as his name's not Patterson for all you old time Giant fans, but
um,
Toast Patterson.
nope.
No, sorry. Good thing you don't remember him.
Round 4, pick 107. The Giants selected tight end from Penn State, Theo Johnson, and this is legitimately exciting, right? Um,
Agreed.
okay, and this is where I'm saying, like, rounds 3 and 4, you can still get people who have impacts on your year one. So 6'6", 260 pounds. That's incredibly, like 99th percentile right there. His
Hmm.
40 time was a 4.57. That was second among tight ends. His 10-yard split was 1.55. That was tied for first among tight ends. His vertical jump 39.5, second among tight ends. Broad jump 10.5, that was second among tight ends, and his 20-yard shuttle was 4.919, that was first among tight ends. So this guy killed the workouts, just destroyed them. Michigan, Penn State lined him up everywhere. He was
Hmm.
traditional tight end in a Y formation. He lined up at H. He lined up split out wide as a wide receiver. This guy is going to replace, and forget whatever we think we know or don't know or whatever about Darren Waller. This guy is the Darren Waller. Like, if he gets hurt, if he can't play, if he's not here next year, he can actually run those same plays.
Look, again, we'll say it again for the eighth time tonight. You draft for the future, and even if Darren Waller has a come to Jesus moment and decides I am all in for football, do we really expect him to be here in 2 years?
No.
No. So this is something where, if Darren Waller for some reason is on this team next year, you have two tight ends who can, catch the ball, do lots of different things. That gives you options. And it also doesn't force this guy to, you know, be an important factor on day one. So I think it's a great transition pick. We're assuming that Waller's not going to be here, but if he's here for one more year or something, we make that transition happen.
Right. And I I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Theo Johnson is better than Darren Waller. I think that would be kind of silly, especially since he's a rookie. But I will say he might be more impactful because he actually could probably block. So
He's
like,
an adequate replacement, and that's what you kind of want to do. You don't have to,
but beyond that, he can actually block, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
Like Darren
yeah,
Waller doesn't really do that shit, and most of these receiving tight ends, they're not like this guy is not Evan Ingram. He's not going in there like here. He just flat out didn't do it in college. I mean, this guy
right.
went to Penn State. He had to block. He's a willing blocker. He has some pretty decent technique. Really, all he needs to do is work on getting some functional strength up. Like, it would be a different story if he were just like technique was all terrible and just kind of slamming his body into people, like kind of like
And
Evan Ingram did.
and the last time I checked, this offensive line isn't that great, so all the help they can get,
Right. Well, I mean and
is a
that's what I
bonus.
mean too. Like, you know, Darren Waller doesn't really offer that side of his game.
Hmm.
This is a legitimate help, and again, the NFL is a totally different animal, and he wasn't great at it in college. He was just functional at it in college, but it's
You can do it
something to
if you
get
could chip
excited
a
about.
guy or something. You're doing your job.
Absolutely. And also, he kind of has the speed to make up after a chip to like get into open space again.
Mm-hmm.
Moving right along here, round five, pick 166. The Giants selected running back slash wide receiver from Purdue, Tyrone Chasey Jr. So this is kind of interesting. This is a guy who's played 6 years in college, um, most of which was at wide receiver. He transitioned to running back. So as you can imagine, he has good receiving skills. He's got decent blocking skills too, because as a wide receiver blocking in the open field, you have to square up. You know what I mean? Like you can't just like throw a shoulder like these running backs do in pass pro. So he actually squares up pretty good in the hole. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's a great blocker. Again, this is a guy who needs to work on sustaining blocks and moving his
And,
feet and
and and
building functional strength.
and I don't care how old he is. If you're drafting somebody, no, you're getting towards the back end of the draft. This is not like I'm investing my future in this guy. It's, give me a couple of solid years,
Sure.
whatever your role is going to be, and then I'm sure we'll draft a running back in, the 2025 draft. It probably will be up to replace you. So,
You're
you
not
know,
wrong. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if we're talking about Chris Wenke, for example, or where we're starting out of the gate, you're 25 years old, 26 years old. That's a serious thing to consider. But for a replaceable asset, I have no problem with how
Yeah,
old he
this
is.
isn't Brandon Whedon coming into the NFL at 28 years old.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is an exciting guy. 5'11", 209 pounds, 4.4 speed. He's like a one-cut zone runner with really, really good vision already. Like I think he really understands some of the line movement in front of him.
Mhm.
And he has the good burst, like the short area burst to get through the hole. And then he has that 4.4 deep speed. What's really interesting is because he's a converted wide receiver, his moves in open space are very much like what you'd expect from a dynamic wide receiver. Like lots of like spin moves, lots of juke moves. He's really able to make people look silly. And therefore, I think he looks a little bit better making linebackers, go one-on-one in the hole. He can really make them look silly.
And a special teams guy too, right?
Yeah, I think he's done some punt returns.
Kickoff return. He had a
Yeah,
98-yard return for Purdue and ranked second in the Big Ten in kickoff return average.
yeah. So with the new kickoff rules, maybe that's just what this is, but I think it's more than that. I think that this is definitely this to me screams like a Brian Dable pick. This is
Hmm.
like Brian Dable, like, oh, I can't wait to use a guy like this.
Yeah.
So this to me is like I can't wait to see what's in the lab. I'm really interested for training camp for Tyrone Tracy. Like
Hmm.
I'm excited in like a playful way. I'm just whatever. I'm not expecting big things, but I just think that there's
It's
so
one of
much
those
you could
things.
do
It's
with
one of
him.
the things when we're at camp in August, going to be like, let's take a look at this guy.
Yeah, I mean like it just in my head you're just thinking like, oh, you're down by one, like that 2022 Titans game week 1 and you're going for it on 2 instead of tying the game up. You're going to go for it all. This
Hmm.
is this is the kind of guy you could put on the field, like a Philly special kind of situation where like
Hmm.
you have something really wacky drawn up that only this guy can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the other team's like, who the hell is Tracy Jr. on the
Yeah.
Giants?
Right.
So I'm kind of excited for that sort of thing. I just
Hmm.
think that he's a fun little chess piece.
Hmm.
And then lastly, in round 6, pick 183, the Giants selected Darius Mousau. I'm not sure I'm saying that right.
I
Linebacker
think you
from
are.
UCLA. He
Hmm.
transferred from Hawaii. This is a high motor player, a really hard worker. Just one of those guys that I think coaches love to have on their team. Like, I think everybody who's ever played team sports has had a coach that was like, I would have that guy on my team every year, no matter what. Like, I think every coach has that favorite player, and it's not because they're the
Hmm.
best. It's because they just shut up and do the work, and they give 100% effort or whatever, right? And I think that's what this is. I don't think this is a guy who's going to be playing linebacker under Shane Bowen. He played at Hawaii with our current special teams coordinator, and I honestly think that that's where he's going to play. He's just going to play special teams, and you know that's going to be his thing.
Hmm. Good.
I mean, it's needed, right? Special teams is
Yeah.
part of the game,
Sure.
and you
Sure.
can't have kick and punt returns going for 78 yards to the house.
Exactly. Yeah.
The only thing that was interesting here is a guy I really liked from LSU, Makai Wingo, the defensive tackle, was still on the board.
Hmm.
Uh, and round 6 is really late for him. Like I had him as like an early day 3 kind of
Oh,
guy.
interesting.
So I thought
Where do you
that
end up going?
not too much further after that. I'm
Hmm.
not sure which. I almost said school. Which team picked him up? Um, but it's just something when I think about the context of the defensive line, like I was saying before, like this guy I think could have made the roster and like pushed for a spot next to Dexter Lawrence, where I don't know, but maybe I have that all wrong. So like it's round 6. I don't really care. Um,
So we
yeah.
have we have 6 picks.
Uh huh.
Early crystal ball. How many of them actually make the 53? Hello?
I'm thinking. I'm
Oh.
looking at him. I'm thinking. I'm sorry. Um, are we talking the week 153?
Yeah,
I'm
let's
gonna
make it easy.
say, man, it's really tough. Tyrone Tracy is really the wild card for me. I'm gonna say 5. Darius Mousau, I think, is gonna make just or Muasau, is going to make it just because of the special teams coordinator. I think he just has that advantage, and what he brings will
Hmm.
be like that 53rd guy, probably, maybe. Maybe he'll sneak onto the practice squad, but I just think he has an inside edge. But Tyrone Tracy, I'm really just not sure. It depends on the numbers in the running back room and special teams stuff. Like, we say returner, but like it's not like Gunnar Olszewski wasn't just re-signed. Like
Right,
it's not like we needed a returner.
right, right, right.
So I don't know. I don't know and I don't know that like either of those two guys on a practice squad is has like the danger possibility of being poached by another team.
Hmm.
But I
Yep.
mean, also, you're crystal balling me here. But like something like Tyrone Tracy taking a kickoff return to the house in the preseason may necessitate the Giants putting him on the 53 just so another team can have
Yeah,
him. You know what
that's
I
kind of
mean?
what I was thinking. That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I could see him actually, he might be the guy that's on the bubble for making the team, but he might be the guy in a preseason game where it's like, h- there's your highlight play. Like, when you're flipping around on Sports Center late at night on Saturday night, and
Oh
it's like,
yeah,
oh yeah, and hey, in the Meadowlands, Giants, Patriots, and here's a punt return for a touchdown or kickoff return for a touchdown. It's that guy. I
yeah.
mean, that wouldn't surprise me if he gets the out of context. Giants still lose 34-3, but the play we're going to show is this kickoff return for a touchdown. He may win that award, the out of context, irrelevant play highlight film guy.
There's nothing irrelevant about scoring a touchdown in a game that results in you only having 3 points. That is something special. Um, so that's the 2024 Giants draft. We've already said how we felt, so those are the players. I'm going to dive into the undrafted free agents,
Hmm.
and we can cover that kind of next week. I don't think it's going to be much, but most of next week, we're going to cover the rest of the NFC East. I am really interested in what the Commanders, Cowboys, and Eagles did, and I honestly have not done a deep dive into their selections and how they fit really into their roster for any of them. So that's
And
really what we're going to talk
rejoice,
about.
Ezekiel Elliott is back with the Cowboys too.
I saw that, and Travis Kelsey got a new deal too today. Um,
So how about that?
but yeah, so that's going to be the upcoming week. We'll get into all that stuff then, and until then, be sure to follow us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and of course on YouTube. And tell a friend about us, the Just
And,
Giants podcast. We've worked
and
very hard.
also one little side note too. I mean, for all you Nick fans out there, I know I was talking with Justin from Talking Giants and maybe trying to get like some people to watch up for a watch party for Thursday for Game 5. So if we do decide to do anything, check the socials for that because we would like to watch together and hopefully, you know, end this Philly series as fast as we can. So keep your ears and eyes open for a potential group event.
Oh yeah, keep your ears and eyes open. Be sure to follow Cranky Fan, Football Grump, and Just Giants Pod on Twitter for I guess updates on that.
Yep.
Um,
And your on your YouTube channel, will you have anything about the draft picks or?
I don't yet, but I'm going to go through on my YouTube channel, the Football Grump channel. I will be going through each draft pick one by one.
There you go.
They're each going to have their own little video, my little commentary over it. So yeah, be sure to follow me on there if you don't already, and you can get all that content. I'm also going to do a mid-season UFL thing, just how things stand and how things look for the UFL and spring football halfway through the season. Um, so yeah, all that stuff's gonna be on that channel. But enough of plugging that. We'll see you guys next week. Until then, go
Go
Giants.
Giants.